Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. You all do know very well, our country has gone through some very, very difficult times. If you take any SDG at all, you will see how at the bottom or close to the bottom Nigeria is. Whether it's number of people killed by malaria in our country, and by the way, malaria kills more people in Nigeria than any war in the world. And yet this is a problem that has been overcome by many countries. Whether you're looking at maternal deaths at childbirth, Nigeria is a slaughterhouse. You're looking at infant mortality, you're looking at the challenge of water. Just take any problem, Nigeria is almost at the bottom. The question is, how come we are where we are? You look at industrialization. Now, people forget so easily that even academics, even myself in some of my work, have had to be awakened to the fact that Nigeria was one of the first third world export-led industrializers. And I teach this stuff, and we keep referring to export-led manufacturers, the newly industrializing economies of Southeast Asia. And I can tell you, in pure confession, I was running a workshop for NIMASA in London about 12 years or so ago, when Mashe was the DG. And I invited some experts from the community, shipping community, to make presentations at it. When one of them started speaking, I was almost embarrassed by what he said because I had not given enough thought to it. He was looking at shipping map of the world 30, 40 years before. And the most flow of industrial goods was coming from Nigeria compared to developing countries. And I thought, wait a minute, this does not sit with the view of the newly industrializing economies of Asia being the ones that move from import substitution, industrialization, to export-led manufacturing development strategies. And I struggled with it until a Chinese lady who works for McKinsey wrote a book titled Africa, the World's Next Great Factory, talking about Chinese investments in Africa and how Africa could become the next great factory. And she went to the fact that NTL in Kaduna, when it was commissioned in 1960, had pre-sold its entire production for the next 6 months in Manchester. Within 1 month, that company had broken even. Nigeria was exporting manufactured goods in 1960 to the UK. And today, we don't produce anymore in this country. I went to a conference in France in 1996 called by former French Prime Minister Raymond Barre. It was in Annecy. It was the Europe-Africa Summit. There were African heads of states, all of us milling around. And the theme of that conference was Africa must produce or die. And I told the story just last Thursday in Morocco, where the AU was looking at policies of development and strategies for Africa. And I reminded the group that in 1996, I was taking a walk down the lake in Annecy with the then Deputy Managing Director of the World Bank, Al-Hassan Ouattara, who, as you all know, is president of Côte d'Ivoire today, a then Deputy Director General of the World Trade Organization, former foreign minister of Mali or Burkina, Ablezo Drago, former Ugandan foreign minister, Olara Otuno. And we were reflecting on the theme, Africa must produce or die. And we have not begun to produce since then. And yet, manufactured exports from developing countries got their beginning here in Nigeria. What happened to us from then till now? So the challenge of what must be corrected in our country, all of these things added to concern about the future of Nigeria. Can we survive this shift from production, which we had, to sharing, which our political class has so embraced with such self-love for themselves that leadership has been about just state capture. And by the way, I don't know how many of you have seen Cyril Ramaphosa's briefing of the world on the Zondo Commission. South Africa has had for several years now a commission looking into state capture. I have served on the boards of South African companies, and there was hardly a board meeting in the last 3 years or 4 that the Zondo Commission's work was not a critical issue. How can politicians allow 1 or 2 Indians to capture their government? And whenever South Africans begin to discuss this and they're so upset, I begin to laugh and they say, what's the matter? I say, come to Nigeria. they own the government. But this is what our political class has done. Because it's all about self-love, they have focused on the personal benefits they get from this relationship with these alien business people, have not grown the Nigerian economy, we've not produced, and we have fallen back in the quality of life of our people. Whenever they have a headache, those of them who say they've done miracles as governors, as whatever, have a headache, they jump on a plane and they head to Europe. That's not how a country makes progress. So all of these factors led many of us to begin to worry. The sentimental reason why this room was picked is that we've had a few meetings in this boardroom. This is Dr. Usman Bugaje's office. And the Rescue Nigeria project had meetings here discussing the challenge of leadership and how we must focus on finding people who have competence, capacity, and patriotism to lead a turnaround of our country. Otherwise, our country will collapse into anarchy. And we can see it happening. We can't travel anymore in our country, all kinds of problems. The onset of that anarchy that Robert Kaplan predicted in a book written 20-something years ago is at us, looking at us. So to rescue Nigeria became a task that must be done. A political base for engaging that emerged in the NC Front. The National Consultative Front was designed to then bring political actors together to try and make this turnaround happen. Wale Kuniyi, who's sitting by me here, worked tirelessly on that project. We've all been at this for a couple of years. Tanko, Yunusa here. As we worked at it, we needed to more closely examine the nature of our political process and why it was impeding growth and development in Nigeria. And one of the things that I at least found as somebody whose training, fundamental training and personal passion is the examination of economic performance and the political conditions that lead to it, is that the structure of our big parties just made it impossible for them to be vehicles of progress for the Nigerian people. It's not because people are good people or bad people. The nature of the structure, in structural economics, there's a paradigm that's called the structure, conduct, performance paradigm. If you want to see how an industry performs, you look at the structure of industry. and you see the conduct that is driven because of the conduct, because of the structure, and you can invariably tell the kind of performance that will come. It was clear, to me at least, that there was no way the PDP or the APC could bring Nigeria to progress. Because what it does is creates transactions, trade-offs between powerful people who want to control power for state capture purposes. And the progress of the people, not deliberately, just somehow becomes secondary. The kind of nepotism that fires off is the reason why Nigeria is not run by competent people. Everywhere you go, second-rate people are in position because of, it's my turn, appoint me, we promised you that, we delivered this. And the consequence is that our country is at the bottom of every measure. And we decided we would sacrifice anything to change this for the sake of our children and their children. It is this that drove the momentum of the third force. Groups, professional groups, like the Congress of Concerned Professionals. Dr. Agada is sitting next to me here to the left. They began to develop structures across the country that would be able to interrogate anybody running for public office, president particularly, from any party, and to decide who they could support to bring about this transforming need that was desperate for Nigeria. So we began to find ways of bringing these groups together. Political parties, social movements, civil society organizations. And we began to use the term the big tent to look at how all of these people work together. A major part of it was engaging the labor unions. Why was it important to engage the labor unions? The labor unions represented a certain broad national structure. The NLC has political commissions in all 36 states of the Federation. And so we began a process of making presentations to the labor unions. I don't know if Wale here can probably remind me of the date we went to their NWC meeting in Lagos, and how the Comrade President Ayuba Waba then so positively responded to this in a speech given on my birthday on the 6th of February this year, that we then said the platform is set for us to move Nigeria forward. And when the hand of God is something, the dynamic of momentum begins to come. And so all these other groups began to become part of this process. And the result was, one day we found that P2B had decided that the PDP wasn't the vehicle. And suddenly he was available as part of our framework. And he became the candidate of the Labour Party. And all of us, following the same general agreements we had in this room, that what we require is a collegial approach. No one man knows it all. Yes. No one man loves anybody more than the other. But a collection of patriotic leaders who are capable can hold each other accountable to the Nigerian people to give Nigeria a new start, a new beginning. It is that new start and new beginning that this initiative has fallen into. And so we thought it was important to brief you on it. When people talk about campaign, they talk about Labour Party. Labour Party is just a part of the big tent. What we have is 1,000 times more than the Labour Party. Much more effective than it. Dr. Agada's organization alone can win the election. And we have like 12 of his organization in this big tent. So we then want to talk about a little bit about our clear goal. Our goal is unashamedly rescuing Nigeria from peril. It is preparing a future for our children that we can all be proud of. Those of us who, as young people, arrived in London with our passport, without a visa, and we just get a stamp and go in, and watch our children unable to get visas to go to the UK, feel that we have done something wrong to our children. And that kind of future must change. And that there is a political class that doesn't understand, because it has lost a sense of shame, what it has done to the next generation. And the fire caught those young people. They began to protest the current order and say it must change. And then these same people, who constitute less than 3% of the population, that's abused the system, begin to offer a counter-narrative. I don't mind the young people, they don't vote. What do you think? They will just go on the internet and make noise. On the day we will win. They are preparing that because they want to rig and they want the world to think it's because young people did not vote. But it will not happen this time. If you check the history of the evolution of things on our continent, the last 4-5 major presidential elections in Africa, people who were ridiculed as internet sensations, civil society, what do they call them? Social media, all of them won. The one in Kenya, where the power of the entire national government was behind Rally Odinga. The one in Malawi, the one in Zambia, the one in Botswana. And so let's tell Nigerians to get ready that the use of Africa. Yeah, just one in Brazil. No, I sent, as soon as I saw the result of Lula da Silva, I sent a text to the president of Nigerian Labour Congress, who is in Geneva, Yuba Waba, heading towards Australia, because he and I spent a lot of time. Our last meeting, Lula was to speak to us, and we had connection problems. And Lula da Silva, as a model, we have, spoken to, tried to draw from the APC Manifesto, written in my living room. All these conditional cash transfers were ideas that I took from Lula's performance as president of Brazil and introduced, and we badly managed it. And Ayuba Waba and I had agreed that we will collaborate with Lula, who was coming back to run for president, and that we will draw from that to build a new Nigeria. So the first reaction I had once I saw the news that Lula had won was to text Ayuba Waba. And this we have to do because Nigeria must rise up again. Amen. We cannot continue to be a crippled nation the way that we are. And so this process involves organizing. One of the big lies that they try to sell you is, labor has no structure. Structure? Are you kidding? The big tent structure is more grassroots 10 times than the APC, PDP structures put together. And that is the communication we want you to recognize. What are the major organs of this structure? First of all, of course, we have an umbrella campaign trust, which is a campaign council, which includes leaders of all the support groups, includes the leaders of the various political parties, and there are several political parties, including the ADCs of this world, yes, all of those are in this big tent. And each will deploy, just like the way Dr. Agada and his group began a campaign across northern Nigeria of advertisements with Kannywood stars. Is it what do they call it? This is advertisement, but jingles is like, in Hausa, like Kannywood stars. It broke across the country on Monday. and this is one group, what they're doing. They have people on ground in every state of the federation, full structure. And this is just one part of it. We can take the same thing from the labor movement. That's different from Labour Party. You can add the Labour Party, you can add these other parties. And what we are trying, therefore, to do is to create a college of actors. And so we describe the structure as an organic bulb of complex redundancy. What is an organic bulb? If you look at the onion is an organic bulb, okay? And you have layers that you can peel away and keep coming. So if something goes wrong at one level, the next level catches it. And you have a fail-safe system. I draw from two disciplines, for example, to illustrate complex redundancy. One discipline is engineering. If you take aviation, for example, every Boeing jet has like 3 or 4 fallbacks. Now, if you look at statistically, a Boeing aircraft does not fall to a fallback up to 1% of the time. So why do you have a second fallback and a third fallback? Because the culture of engineering is to ensure safety at whatever cost. Now, as a professor of business, I can tell you that this constantly brings fights between finance people and the engineering people. Because finance people say, this is a waste of money. Why do we need fallback on fallback? But if you go to political science, the same phenomenon exists. I keep referring people to the work of University of California, Berkeley, political scientists of some fame from the 70s, a gentleman called Aaron Wildavsky. He wrote a book back then called The Politics of the Budgetary Process, and was trying to justify why, for example, if there is a law to be made on banking, it first goes to the floor of the US Congress, where it is read, is discussed, is debated, then it's sent down to the Finance Committee, where it's discussed, debated, position taken, and then it's further sent down to the Banking Subcommittee, who then have public hearings. And after all of this, he walks the process back again. And he describes that process as complex redundancy, which is why laws, when they come out of that system, are very often pretty tight and serve the people better, because it takes in the input of the experts, the stakeholders, and everybody through that process. The campaign structure the Big Tent is deploying is a campaign structure of the organic bulb of complex redundancy. And we know, we know that with this structure, we're going to beat the daylights out of these fellows at the polls next year. Now, amongst the many organs of this process is, for example, what we call a policy review and future view team. Now, what is that? That is a standing body of people who have specific focal interests, whether it's housing, whether it's manufacturing, whether it is whatever, activity area of government. These people are supported, these focal persons who are in this team are supported by what we call the deep dive teams. These are going to be like 16, on average, groups of experts drawn from Nigerians all over the world. For example, if you take healthcare, we have Nigerian doctors, administrators from all over the world, several of who are in this deep dive team. From their deep dives, they present positions to the focal persons for health, in the future view policy team, who then come to the team and make presentations on what we should be doing about healthcare. I mean, 3 weeks ago, I think we took that of health, 3 or 4 weeks ago. We meet every week on Wednesdays, just like the Nigerian cabinet meets. So we have a meeting this evening of this team. And the team takes a position on issues which it then, first of all, uses to advise the candidate that represents the Big Ten, the Labour Party candidate, Utomi and Baba Ahmed. Dati, Yusuf Dati Baba Ahmed, and Peter Gregory Obi. Then take a briefing from what has come through this, and they can use it to speak to the issues. In addition to that, we use it to create an atmosphere of public conversation around those issues. Because unless we have an enlightened electorate, we don't have a democracy. One of the best thinkers on democracy in the world today, still alive, is the German philosopher Jürgen Habermas. Jürgen Habermas is the philosopher of modernity and of the public sphere. And Habermas says that democracy in modernity is about rational public conversation. And that's what we lack in Nigeria. If we had rational public conversation, 80% of people who represent us will not be in public office because they lack the capacity to engage in rational public conversation. So this struggle is about getting rid of these kinds of people who are supposed to be our representatives and getting people who have knowledge, who have compassion for the people, step forward and serve the people. The reward of public life is not the size of your bank account. The reward of public life is not in the motorcade that has cost you. The British Prime Minister, the day that he leaves office, he walks with his bag away on foot, on his bicycle. And even as Prime Minister, it's just when they want to have a ceremony, it's 2 cars. He's in one car in front. That's all. But here, we have to intimidate Nigerians, push them off the roads so that they know we are big men. And government costs us a fortune to run. We must cut the costs of governing to its barest minimum because the resources that are required to improve the lives of Nigerians are currently being used by politicians to make themselves superfluously, I don't know what language to use to describe what they do of themselves. It is undemocratic, it is unhuman, inhuman, whatever language I will now add to it, but they don't recognize it because they don't have a sense of shame because they're not Democrats. Because they're just agents of the people in service to the people. And yet what it is that they become lords over the people. That's not what democracy is about. And the campaign of 2023 is about returning us to democracy. It's about taking our country back. And all of us have a duty to educate the people to this essence of why we are here. I think I will just wrap this up so we can take questions to say that the Nigerian people have spoken. They have said they are tired of this old order. They will wait for us to release our manifesto, then they will copy it, add some things and come out and shout, this is our manifesto. But in their heads, they have no plan to implement them. They have all the money they've taken from our treasury. They will use it to make flash of all of these things. I wrote the last one, and I'm saying to you that they didn't implement the things we wrote. In fact, at the point they said, who are those who say we promised that? We didn't promise it, though. It's some people who wrote it and called it our manifesto. We must hold people accountable. All those who failed us yesterday, we must. Indeed, I say to you that if we have a sense of shame in this country, there should be many rallies by APC, but there should be rallies of apology. rallies of mea culpa, we're sorry we failed you. We're sorry that all the things. Now they're saying they can, for example, get rid of what's the insecurity thing in 6 months. They said it before. Come on. What kind of broken record is this? Is this an insult to the Nigerian people? You and I know better. And I'll close with just one little thing. You know, there was a group of young people who thought they would demystify this sage. All of you know this story. This sage, he's always right, he's always right. We'll demystify him today. So they came to the sage. They had a small bird in their hand behind them. And they say, great sage, if you are so wise, tell us, this bird we're holding, is it dead or is it alive? And the sage smiled and said, you know, young people, if I say the bird is dead, you release it and it will fly off. If I say it's alive, you squeeze it to death and say, yeah, it's a dead bird. It's a make or break for Nigerian people. It's a you fail, you die kind of scenario. That's where the passion is coming from. So that's what's holding this group together. The fact that they are standing in the gap for a people, whether to die or to live. So that bond, that passion, knowing that this is about the future of our children, is what holds this together. Not transactions of what position will you get or what this can you. So that's the traditional way. That's the way they do it in APC and PDP. What will you give me? What will you not give me? No, this is different. This is driven by the fact that if we don't, our children die. And that's why we're trying to do this. That's the first part of that question. And the second part of the question about the presidential candidate and the manifesto. Look, there are two things. First of all, there's a process. The manifesto started with, or the manifesto production started with a full engagement of the team working on this. 15 school people, professors, politicians, they spent several weeks literally locked into a hotel room, most times paying their own bills, by the way. Or not a hotel room, hotel rooms with a hall where they've been brainstorming. I have been part of it. The first briefing, which the candidate was asked to provide his own mantra or where things should go in, took place in my house. So it's not in fact, if you want me to be even more cruel, on the same table where we wrote the APC constitution in my house, the APC manifesto. And with that brief, work continued. And it comes in drafts. The first draft was produced, and the process was bound to end with a buy-in from Peter Obi and Dati Baba Ahmed. And that point had not been arrived at. But the candidate had been drawing from, if you listen to his presentation at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, he spoke to 7 pillars. And those 7 pillars are in that manifesto and will be there at the end. Okay? But somehow, in a technical shuffle of errors, somebody put out a draft, an early draft, which is why I said, look, this thing is not finished. And I can tell you, as a matter of honest observing, that was both from the fact that the process was not formally completed with the fanfare of a formal launch, and the fact that whenever we put out a document, those people will go and grab it and then put one sentence there. I'm glad that a spokesperson for the PDP already said that the APC went and stole the Hope 93 document and called it their manifesto. They're not only doing that, they're adding from whatever we put out. So we're not in a rush to put out for them to go and take and edit. And that's part of why Mr. Obi made that statement. So after their own is out, you will formally see ours out, not giving them the opportunity to play those funny games again.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Your name, please.
My name is Beatrice.
Concept. That's why I said it was important for us to hold this meeting on this table, because we discussed those issues here on this table in Dr. Bugaji's office. The Rescue Nigeria project was built on that very concept of collegial accountability. Mr. Peter Obi bought into this idea from get-go. It's both a moral hold and a rational hold, that collectively we will hold him accountable. But thank God that his history is that of feeling an obligation to accounting to his electors. And so we are confident that both history and the collective agreements that we have reached will make him accountable.